Carlos Sainz and Ferrari's strong Mexican Grand Prix victory would have been the headline if it hadn't been overshadowed by the second meeting between Formula One Championship contenders Max Verstappen and Lando Norris in a week. This time, Verstappen received a double penalty, and it's safe to assume he wasn't thrilled about it, making sure to let everyone know both during and after the race. Will this penalty determine the title race? And above all, what will the FIA do to prevent this from happening again over the next 4 races? This happened a week after he avoided punishment for 2 controversial moments against the McLaren driver in the United States, overtaking him with a dive into the first corner at the start, then racing off track and shoving Norris wide while defending his place later in the race. Verstappen's violations in Mexico were more obvious than in Austin, where he took advantage of the racing parameters that the stewards used to determine situations in battle. Last week, Verstappen followed the letter of the law. He maintained his own car on track at the start, when he most likely benefited from the extra leniency granted by the stewards on the first lap, and later in the race, he critically reclaimed the lead at the apex when Norris attempted to make an overtaking on the outside. The stewards determined that Verstappen had earned the right to crowd Norris at the exit, despite the fact that Verstappen left the track somewhat himself, since the standards no longer require the car on the inside to remain on track. That appears to be changing as part of a strategy to amend the standards before the end of the season, in response to what happened in Austin, since other drivers think it is an unnecessary loophole, and the issue was discussed extensively in Mexico on Friday. However, under the present regulations, Verstappen's actions in the United States were theoretically legal. In Mexico, however, he obviously crossed that line twice. The first 10-second penalty was issued for pushing Norris off the track. Like in Austin, Norris attempted to pass Verstappen around the outside, but this time he was able to have a better overlap into the turn and to the exit. He was beside Verstappen at the apex, not behind, and remained there until Verstappen shoved him off. Norris returned to the track ahead of the Red Bull and leader Carlos Sainz, whom he promptly allowed back after mistakenly passing the Ferrari. To justify their decision on the Turn 4 incident involving Verstappen and Norris, the stewards stated that they reviewed positioning marshalling system data, video, radio, and in-car video evidence. Norris was attempting to overtake on the outside of Verstappen at Turn 4. Norris was ahead of Verstappen at the entry, apex, and towards the exit of the turn when he started being forced off the track. The stewards believed that the maneuver was done in a safe and controlled manner, and that Norris would have been able to make the maneuver on the track had he not been forced off the track by Verstappen. Norris cut the corner, but immediately gave the position he gained as a result back to Sainz. The penalty is the standard penalty in such cases. Verstappen retaliated by making a ridiculous move into the medium-speed left-hander at the start of the sweeps. He overtook Norris on the inside, but sprinted wide into the runoff area, dragging Norris with him. This resulted in another 10-second penalty for straying off track and gaining an advantage, because Verstappen was obliged to stay on track on this occasion, whereas Norris was seen to be overtaking on the outside in Austin. And as for what went down at Turn 8, the stewards reviewed video, CCTV, and in-car video evidence. Following the incident in Turn 4, Verstappen attempted to pass Norris on the inside at Turn 8. Verstappen was ahead at the apex of Turn 8 and would have been entitled to racing room. However, he was not able to complete the maneuver on the track, left the track, and kept the lasting advantage, gaining the position, incidentally forcing Norris off the track. This resulted in the second penalty, and after the race, Verstappen wasn't too happy discussing things with the media, but above all, he claimed his own team has failed him in recent months. He claimed the lack of racing pace in his Red Bull Formula One car was the primary cause of his collision with Lando Norris at the Mexican Grand Prix. Verstappen was more concerned with his lack of performance in the 71-lap race at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, claiming that this resulted in him being placed in such places for a punishment. You know, honestly, 20 seconds is a lot, but I'm not going to cry about it, and I'm also not going to share my opinion, Verstappen told the audience. The biggest problem that I have is that today was a bad day in terms of race pace. That was quite clear again on the mediums and on the hard tyres. I just felt that the turn 4 penalty was a bit more of like a question mark. Turn 7 is what it is. Honestly, those two things are also not my problem. The problem is that we are too slow, and that's why I'm being put in those kind of positions. That is my problem. Verstappen sees his own mistake, but his team boss Horner feels Norris braked far slower for the turn than he did for his quickest lap later in the race, as evidenced by printouts of GPS traces shown to the media. First of all, I think it was very harsh to give two 10-second penalties, Horner said. I think there's something more fundamental. I mean, obviously there's been a reaction to last weekend. I think it's very important for the drivers' stewards and the drivers to sit down. Because looking at the GPS, this is on the run down to turn 4. This is actually Lando versus Lando. In Lando's fastest lap of the Grand Prix, the point that he's braking for turn 4, and then obviously executing the corner. On the lap that he has the incident with Max, he is 15 kilometers an hour faster and later on the brakes than his fastest lap of the Grand Prix. He wouldn't have made the corner, he would have run off track. You can see from his onboard steering. Of course, at this point in the race, he's got probably 80 kilograms more fuel than at the point that he's done his fastest lap. It used to be a reward of the bravest to go around the outside. I think we're in danger of flipping the overtaking laws upside down, where drivers will just try to get their nose ahead at the apex, and then claim that they have to be given room on the exit. You can see quite clearly he's effectively come off the brakes, gone in super late to try and win that argument, as far as the way these regulations are written, and then at that point, you're penalised, he further explained. I just think maybe we're over-complicating things, and when you have to revert to an instruction manual of an overtake, I mean, the racing principles for years have been, if you have the inside line, you dictate the corner. And I think the way the regulations or the guidelines have evolved is encouraging a driver to have his nose ahead at the apex, irrelevant of whether you're going to make the corner. Horner might still be worried about Norris. His driver, however, is more worried about the car. Reflecting on his race, Verstappen thought he had very little grip on the hard tyre and struggled to get his brakes to bite, costing time to the Mercedes duo. He remained harsh while debating the ramifications of the racing rules, believing that it was just difficult racing and that it was up to him to drive as he saw appropriate. I mean, to get back to 6th was all right, but then I couldn't even fight the Mercedes cars in front. I just had no grip. I was just sliding a lot. I couldn't brake. So yeah, it was a very tough one. We're trying to improve, but I mean also it was more promising. Here again, it was a bit more tough, so it's a bit odd. But a few things to look at, and hopefully, of course, Brazil, we can be more competitive. Lando and I didn't touch, so just racing hard. But at the end of the day, everyone speaks for themselves in the driver's briefing. Of course, can the rules be better? Maybe yes, maybe not. It's always the same thing. I mean, I just drive how I think I have to drive. Last week that was all right. This week, 20-second penalty. That's what it is. Life goes on, you know. The lead is still 47 points. Hopefully we can just be a little bit more competitive. It's no secret that 47 points is still more than enough to clinch the title, but the RB20's performance in recent months has really shocked the entire grid. So, the real question is, can they even stay close to McLaren in the last 4 races?